Rain slid down the streetlights like tears that refused to fall. Midnight traffic whispered past a narrow city road where old apartment blocks leaned toward each other, tired and gray. An elderly man lay on the wet pavement, his breath broken, his hands shaking as he tried to shield his face. A young woman stood between him and a crowd that had already begun to turn away. Her jacket was thin, her hair soaked, but her voice was firm. "Stop," she said, stepping closer to the danger without thinking. Somewhere across the street, a black car slowed. Inside it, a powerful man looked up just as the girl raised her hands to protect the stranger on the ground, and in that instant, something ancient inside him cracked open. "Before we go any further, pause with me for a second. Where are you watching this from right now? What city, what corner of the world?" It still amazes me how one moment of kindness can reach hearts far beyond a single street. Drop your place below, and let this story travel. The car stopped without a sound. Its windows were dark, its presence heavy. Michael Russo sat in the back seat, his fingers resting on a silver ring he hadn't taken off in decades. People feared his name. In quiet rooms, deals were sealed because of him, and lives were broken because of him. But tonight, none of that mattered. All he saw was the old man on the ground. His father. Frank Russo had refused the guards again. He always did. "I can walk," he'd said that evening, his pride stronger than his bones. Michael had let him go, annoyed, distracted by business calls. Now Frank lay bleeding, one eye swelling shut, his coat torn open like paper. The attacker was gone, just another shadow that disappeared after doing damage. What remained was this girl. She knelt beside Frank, ignoring the rain soaking her jeans. Her hands hovered, unsure where to touch without causing pain. "Sir," she whispered, "can you hear me? Please, stay awake." Michael opened the car door before his driver could stop him. The cold hit his face. His shoes touched the wet ground as he crossed the street, steps measured, heart suddenly unsteady. The girl looked up at him, eyes sharp but scared, ready to fight again if needed. "I called an ambulance," she said quickly, as if expecting blame. "I couldn't just leave him." Michael didn't answer. He dropped to his knees beside his father, the world narrowing to Frank's broken breathing. "Dad," he said, the word catching in his throat. Frank's eyes fluttered. "Mikey," he murmured, confused. The girl leaned back, giving space. Only then did Michael really see her. She was young, early 20s maybe. There was a scar along her eyebrow, faded but real. Her hands trembled now that the danger was over. Not weak. Just human. "Thank you," Michael said quietly. It was a word he rarely used. She shrugged, standing up. "Anyone should have helped," she replied, but there was pain behind the simplicity. They didn't. Sirens grew louder in the distance. Red and blue lights painted the wet walls around them. Michael stood as paramedics rushed in, lifting Frank gently onto a stretcher. One of them glanced at Michael, recognition flashing for a second, then disappearing behind professionalism. As they loaded Frank into the ambulance, Michael turned back to the girl. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Lily." "Lily," he repeated, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "You saved my father's life." She shook her head. "I just stood there." "That's more than most," he said. The ambulance doors closed. Michael's driver stepped closer, whispering, "We should go. Hospital will be secure." Michael nodded, then surprised himself. "Wait," he said to Lily. "Come with us. At least get checked. You're soaked. You could be hurt." For a moment, Lily looked like she might run. Her eyes scanned the black car, the suited men, the power hanging in the air. "I'm fine," she said, taking a step back. Michael softened his voice. "Please. For my peace." Something in his tone broke through her guard. She exhaled slowly and nodded once. Okay. But just the hospital. They rode in silence. Lily sat stiffly, hands folded in her lap. Michael watched her reflection in the window. She stared out at the passing lights like someone used to being invisible. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Frank was taken into surgery. Doctors spoke in calm, careful words. Michael stood alone in the waiting room for the first time in years, the power stripped from him by fear. Lily sat across from him, wrapped in a thin blanket a nurse had given her. She kept her eyes down. "Where's your family?" Michael asked gently. She laughed once, short and bitter. "Don't have one." The words landed heavier than she knew. Michael looked at her again, really looked. The scar. The eyes that knew how to stand between violence and the weak. A strange feeling stirred in his chest. A question he wasn't ready to ask yet. Because somewhere deep inside, a memory was waking, of a child lost long ago, of a woman who left with secrets and never returned. Down the hall, a red light above the surgery room stayed on. And as Michael waited for his father to survive the night, he had no idea that the girl who stepped into the rain for a stranger was about to step into the truth of her own life. The light flickered once, and then everything began to change. The red light above the surgery room hummed softly, a small sound that felt louder than Michael's thoughts. Hospitals had a way of stripping time of meaning. Minutes stretched, seconds collapsed. He stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching rain smear the city into a blur of silver lines. For a man who controlled outcomes for a living, this waiting was a punishment he couldn't buy his way out of. Across the room, Lily sat alone, shoulders drawn inward. Eyes fixed on the floor as if it might open and swallow her. A nurse passed by and offered water. Lily nodded politely, thanked her, then didn't drink. Her hands still trembled, the delayed echo of fear finally finding its voice. Michael noticed. He crossed the room slowly, careful not to startle her. "You should drink," he said, holding out another cup he'd taken from the dispenser. "Shock doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in." She accepted it this time. Their fingers brushed, brief, electric. Lily pulled back first. "Thanks." They sat in silence again, but it was different now. Less empty. The kind of quiet that invites truth if you let it. "You didn't have to do what you did," Michael said after a while. "Most people wouldn't." Lily stared into the water. "I know. So why did you?" She shrugged, but her shoulders tensed. "Because someone once didn't do it for me." Her voice was steady, but the words carried weight. "And I promised myself I'd never be like them." Michael felt something tighten in his chest. "That's a heavy promise." "It's lighter than regret," she replied. "If you were standing there that night, rain pouring, danger close, what would you have done? Would you have stepped forward, or looked away like the others did? Be honest and tell me in the comments. And if this moment stirred something in you, tap like, not for drama, but to remind the world that compassion still has witnesses." A doctor finally emerged, pulling down his mask. Michael stood instantly. "He's stable," the doctor said. "It was bad, but he's strong. He'll need time." Michael exhaled, a breath he'd been holding since the street. "Thank you." Frank was moved to recovery. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, but his chest rose and fell with stubborn rhythm. Michael stood by the bed, watching the man who had taught him everything, strength, pride, and all the wrong lessons too. "You scared me," Michael murmured. Frank's eyes opened a fraction. "Still standing?" He whispered, then drifted back to sleep. When Michael stepped back into the hallway, Lily was waiting near the vending machines, jacket drying over a chair. "Is he?" she asked. "He'll live," Michael said. "Because of you." She shook her head again, but there was relief in her eyes. "I'm glad." They walked out of the hospital together at dawn. The rain had stopped, leaving the city clean and raw. Sunlight caught on broken puddles like scattered glass. Michael hesitated before the car. "Let me at least take you home." Lily hesitated too. "I don't really have one." The words came softly, but they landed hard. "I stay wherever I can," she added. "Tonight was a friend's couch. Usually it's a shelter, or wherever." Michael nodded slowly, absorbing this. "Come with me," he said, surprising them both. "Just for breakfast. No obligations. No strings." Suspicion flickered across her face. "Why?" "Because you stood between my father and the ground," he said simply. "Because I don't want to be someone who walks away." They ended up in a small diner far from his usual world. Vinyl seats cracked with age, coffee too strong, light spilling through wide windows. Lily relaxed a little there, hands wrapped around a mug, shoulders easing. She told him pieces. Not everything. A childhood that felt more like borrowed time. A mother who moved constantly, chasing work and running from mistakes. A father who was never mentioned, not even a name. "I aged out," Lily said quietly. "System stops caring once you're old enough to be invisible." Michael listened without interrupting. Every detail carved something deeper inside him. There were gaps in her story, spaces that felt familiar. Too familiar. "Do you know where you were born?" he asked carefully. She frowned. "Yeah. St. Mary's. Downtown." "Why?" Michael's pulse shifted. St. Mary's. The same hospital. The same year. The same city where his own life had fractured when a woman he loved disappeared. With their newborn, leaving only silence behind. He forced a smile. No reason. But the question wouldn't let go. They parted outside the diner. Lily adjusted her jacket. "Thank you," she said. "For not making tonight feel transactional." Michael met her eyes. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "If you'll allow it." She considered, then nodded. "Okay." As she walked away, Michael stayed where he was, the city moving around him. Somewhere between fear and hope, a truth was circling, dangerous, fragile, impossible to ignore. And deep inside, a door he had sealed for decades began to creak open, just a little. The days that followed were a blur of routines and quiet investigations. Michael found himself checking the hospital each morning, not out of obligation, but because he couldn't stop thinking about Lily. She had become a shadow in his life that refused to leave, a reminder of both his father's vulnerability and something else he couldn't yet name. Meanwhile, Lily stayed close, taking shifts at the diner and volunteering at a small community center. She had a knack for noticing what others ignored. An elderly man struggling with groceries, a child too quiet in the corner, someone's eyes pleading for a simple, "Are you okay?" She moved through the city like a quiet guardian. One afternoon, Michael arrived at the diner just as Lily was helping a woman carry boxes inside. Watching her bend, steady and sure, Michael's chest tightened. "Lily," he said, voice low. She turned, a faint smile flickering as recognition sparked. "You're early," she said, brushing her hair back. "I needed coffee," he replied. "And maybe an excuse to see you." They sat at a corner table. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting stripes across their cups. Michael watched her stir sugar into her drink, and in that simple, domestic gesture, he felt something unfamiliar, warmth that wasn't obligation, or duty, or power. "You've been helping a lot of people," he said cautiously. "Why?" Lily looked up. Her eyes were serious now, almost haunted. "Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would?" she asked. "Right, yes, and tell me their name, maybe gratitude can travel further than we think." Michael blinked. He hadn't expected a challenge. "Yes," he said finally. "My father. Even when he made mistakes, he tried to do the right thing at the end." A silence settled over the table. Outside, the city hummed along, unaware of the quiet conversation that carried the weight of unspoken confessions. It was during one of these mornings, a week later, that Michael learned the first truth. He was sifting through old family records, a habit he'd developed when worry kept him awake. Birth certificates, hospital logs, adoption papers, his eyes scanned for something familiar, something he had refused to confront for years. Then he saw it, Lily's full name, her birth date, the hospital where she had been born. And there it was, the same hospital, the same year, the same ward where his first daughter had been taken from him. The world seemed to tilt. Michael's hands shook. His heart raced in a rhythm he hadn't felt since that night decades ago when everything had gone silent. Could it really be? Could Lily, the girl who saved his father, who moved through life with quiet courage, be the child he had lost? He didn't confront her immediately. That would be reckless, terrifying, and unfair. Instead, he watched, studied, waited for a moment when truth might reveal itself gently. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the diner in shades of gold, Michael finally spoke. "Lily," he said quietly, drawing her attention. "I need to ask you something, personal." She hesitated. "Okay. Do you remember anything about your early childhood? Your parents?" Lily frowned, confusion clouding her features. I know my mom left. My dad, I don't even know if he exists." "Why?" Michael's pulse thundered. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Because I think I might have been the father you never knew." For a moment, Lily laughed nervously, thinking it a joke. But when she saw the intensity in his eyes, the desperation, the fear, the hope, her hands froze. "You, what?" she whispered. He exhaled slowly. "I'm saying, that you were taken from me as a baby. And now, after all these years. I think you're right here in front of me." Time slowed. The diner felt impossibly small, yet infinite. Outside, birds chirped as the city carried on, unaware of the revelation inside. Lily's eyes glistened, confusion and disbelief battling with a flicker of something ancient, belonging. "Now it's your turn, share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." Tears ran down Lily's face as she processed. "All this time, all I had was survival. And now, you're saying I was never truly alone." Michael reached across the table, hand steady on hers. "You were never alone. And you never will be again." The revelation didn't erase years of struggle, of abandonment, of pain. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of solitude that had kept them both prisoners. And in that crack, light began to seep in, tentative but real. They sat together, two pieces of a fractured family finally touching, neither willing to speak for a while. Outside, the city gleamed under streetlights, rain returning in a soft drizzle, painting the world in silver again. A new chapter was beginning, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably theirs. And deep inside Michael, a father's heart, long hardened by loss and power, softened with the weight and wonder of rediscovery. The weeks that followed were a careful dance between fear and hope. Michael had to navigate his world, the one filled with power, enemies, and old loyalties, while holding on to this new, fragile connection with Lily. And Lily, she had to reconcile. The girl who had fought alone for survival with the daughter who had suddenly been found. Michael invited her to the Russo estate, not as an obligation, but to slowly show her that family could exist outside shadows and streets. The house was enormous, sprawling across manicured lawns, a place that had always felt cold and unapproachable. Yet that morning, it felt different. The air smelled of freshly baked bread, and sunlight streamed through high windows, warming corners that had long been frozen. "Do you like it?" Michael asked, guiding her through a hall lined with portraits. Lily's eyes darted nervously, touching frames but never too closely. "It's a lot," she said softly. It's not like home. But, it's not bad. You'll make it feel like home, Michael said, and for the first time in months, he smiled without restraint. Later, in the study, he found himself opening up about the world he had built, the choices he had made, the lives he had destroyed, and the regrets that had never left him. Lily listened, silent but absorbing every word, her gaze unwavering. There was pain there, yes, but also a raw honesty he hadn't shown anyone else. When he finished, she finally spoke. I can't imagine all of that. But I see you now. And that matters. A gentle warmth settled between them. For the first time, Michael realized that power wasn't protection. Love was. And perhaps it was love, patient and brave, that had finally guided them to this moment. Then came the confrontation Michael had dreaded, the realization that finding Lily would also bring enemies to their door. Word of the girl who saved his father, who was now revealed as his daughter, traveled fast through whispers and shadows. Old rivals saw vulnerability as opportunity. One night, while Michael and Lily were in the garden, a black SUV slid into the driveway. Men stepped out, faces hard and unyielding. Michael's hand brushed Lily's, a silent warning. "You don't have to fight," she whispered. "I do," he said. "But with you safe." The tension broke only because the men didn't expect the unshakable courage Lily now carried. She stepped forward, calm, eyes steady. "Leave him alone. Or deal with me." For a brief, terrifying moment, the air crackled. Then the men paused, recognizing the fire she didn't know she had inherited. Michael's old world collided with this new one, the daughter he never thought he'd meet standing firm, fearless. After they left, Michael turned to her. "That was incredible." Lily shrugged, a faint smile on her lips. "I learned from the best," she said softly. "Be honest, could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply." In the quiet aftermath, father and daughter stood in the moonlit garden. Michael's hand found hers, and she squeezed back. For years, they had been strangers to each other, but now, even in a world fraught with danger, there was connection, solid, enduring, human. They spent the next days rebuilding trust, learning each other's rhythms, sharing stories that had been hidden in the corners of memory. Frank Russo recovered, his presence a gentle reminder that family could survive even the worst violence. He would smile at Lily now, not with fear or authority, but with pride and love. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope, maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden sipping coffee, Lily turned to Michael. "Thank you, for finding me. Even when I didn't know I wanted to be found." Michael smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. "No, thank you. For standing up for life when most would walk away. For teaching me that courage isn't about power, it's about heart." And in that moment, they understood the truth of their journey, that pain could lead to redemption, that love could heal old wounds, and that even in a world hardened by crime and sorrow, human kindness, small, brave, and unyielding, could change everything. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." Rain began to fall softly again, washing the streets and the garden, leaving behind the scent of possibility. Michael and Lily stood together, father and daughter, survivor and protector, hands entwined. And for the first time, in the quiet, glimmering world around them, everything felt whole. A new dawn awaited, and they would face it, together.